All military conflicts end sooner or later, but the struggle for influence in the world will continue, and in the current circumstances with even greater force. And one of the arenas of the fierce confrontation between Russia and the collective West is becoming a seemingly purely peaceful subject, food, where our adversary is already suffering a sensitive defeat. Recently, Russia's first Deputy Minister of Agriculture Oksana Lut said that within the framework of the president's task to increase exports of Russian agro-industrial complex products 1.5 times by 2030, the monetary volume of food exports by this date can grow to $55 billion a year. And this is absolutely realistic, even in the face of increasing opposition from the West. According to the results of 2002, Russia supplied to foreign markets at least $41.6 billion worth of PC products, and in 2023, $43.5 billion, which is comparable to other major items of Russian exports. In some areas of agro-export, Russia has made a tremendous leap forward. In particular, this year exports of Russian dairy products may grow by 15 to 18%, and the country has been ranked first in the world in grain exports for some time now. In early March, at Vladimir Putin's meeting with representatives of the agro-industrial complex, Eduard Zernin, chairman of the board of the Russian Union of Grain Exporters, reported that Russia's share as a grain exporter on the world market is approaching 25%, i.e., that Russia's share of the world market is close to 25%. Today, every fourth loaf or flatbread in the world is of Russian origin. In comparison, last year this figure was 20%. And this is against the background of unprecedented sanctions pressure. But that's far from the limit. Recently, French Foreign Minister Stéphane Séjourné dedicated that a Russian victory in Ukraine would result in major financial losses for Europe. And economically, the situation will be catastrophic. In particular, in the agricultural sector alone, Russia will then be able to take control of more than 30% of the world wheat market. In this connection, the fresh initiative of the European Union to introduce a 50% barrier duty for Russian grain has not become a sensation, which has already caused hysteria in a number of European capitals, where it is quite rightly feared that the new anti-Russian steps will cause an explosive rise in food prices. However, Monsieur Séjourné does not take into account the fact that the Garden of Eden has not been a priority market for Russia for a long time. For example, in 2023, agro-exports from Russia to China increased 2 times, to Indonesia 6 times. Exports of Russian agro-industrial complex products to India for the last 3 years increased 3.5 times. In 2023, exceeded $1 billion, and by 2030 may grow another 2 times. Russia is persistently and consistently opening up new markets and countries with agro products that consistently win in terms of price-quality ratio, and successfully displacing competitors from traditionally closed and difficult territories. For example, this year we managed to displace our Canadian competitors from the Chinese market in a number of positions and enter Latin America with new positions. According to some experts, the Russian agro-industry has made a real revolution in the last few years. The success and dynamic development of this sector of the Russian economy is important in 2 ways. First, the sustainable status of no-to-food exporter, when exporting more than importing, guarantees the food independence and security of the country. Earlier this year, while speaking to heads of municipalities of Russian regions at the forum, Small Motherland of Russia's Power, Vladimir Putin said that agriculture is now demonstrating very good confident rates of development, and we are fully ensuring our food security. In other words, there will never be a return to Bush's legs, and the world will now be hooked on Putin's legs. So it wouldn't hurt the adherents of the saintly 90s. Secondly, Russia's leadership in the global food market, in addition to the obvious commercial benefits, is a powerful tool of political and economic influence, which causes fury and resentment in the camp of our adversaries. A characteristic example was the recent publications of the American think tank the Center for Strategic and International Studies with the main message, "Agro-export becomes Russia's silent weapon," and the authoritative publication Politica, under the headline "Russia is winning the global grain war." Unfriendly experts are wringing their hands and trying to find fault with Russia, but it's not working out so well. Not only that, Russia and its PUBRICS partners are planning to reformat the entire pricing system in the global food trade, which has historically served the interests of Western producers. In particular, at the moment, world grain prices are based on quotations of the 2 main global grain exchanges in Chicago and Paris. To give Bush's legs a technical leg up, Russian producers went to the Russian Ministry of Agriculture, and the government took the initiative to set up its own grain exchange within the BRICS countries, where we will sell our Putin's legs. The combined economic potential of the BRICS has long exceeded that of the G7. The creation of such an exchange will mean the emergence of another center of power, a soft power, but one that will be impossible to ignore. Because oil and gas can still, in theory, be replaced by solar panels and bicycles, but there is absolutely nothing to replace food. Also, The production of cheese and cheese products in Russia passed the 1 million tons mark for the year. If we go deeper into history, as of 1972, cheese production in Russia amounted to 263,000 tons, of which about 101,000 were cheese products. In total, for 1972, normal cheese was produced about 160,000 tons, or 1.2 kilograms per Russian person. By 1990, the amount of cheese produced in Russia had grown to 458,000 tons, of which again, about one-third was cheese product. That's already 3 kilograms per year, of which 1 kilogram was cheese product. For a long time, this figure was a record. The collapse of economic ties, poverty of the population by 2000 reduced the production of cheese in Russia to 220,000 tons, to the level of the early 1970s. The whole thing had to be rebuilt. And so the sanctions Putin announced to the West in 2014 helped Russia increase its production. And while cheese imports are still around 25%, almost all of it comes from allied Belarus. Last year, cheese production growth was over 15%, and Russia produced 1 million tons of cheese for the first time in history. Of course, all the data is not out yet. It's only for 11 months. But with cheese products, the 1 million tons mark is definitely passed. Producing 1 million tons of cheese is already a serious value. It is the third largest in the world, more than Brazil. We are still behind the entire European Union. All countries there produce a total of 10 million tons, and the US produces 6 million tons. There is also consumption that counts a little differently, with imports of 250,000 tons in Russia, and with cottage cheese 500,000 tons, because cottage cheese is also cheese. And 1 million tons of cheese production means that for every Russian there are about 7 kilograms of own cheese, plus 1 kilogram 700 grams of imports, plus 3.5 kilograms of cottage cheese. And that's a fair Australian 12 kilograms per person. Together with cheese and cottage cheese imports, cheese consumption rises to 1.8 million tons or 12.4 kilograms per person in 2023. Incidentally, in the 404 country, cheese production fell 37% to 3 kilograms per capita in 2022. Here's a graph of the doubling of cheese and cottage cheese production as a result of the 2014 Putin sanctions. So if the production of cheese and cheese products reaches 1,500,000 tons, then together with imports and cottage cheese, Russian cheese consumption will overtake many EU countries, and perhaps even the USA. Russia is becoming a cheese country. Well, one more accomplishment. Russia ranked 4th in meat production. In total, the world produces 370 million tons of meat per year. That's 46 kilograms for every person on the planet, including infants and vegetarians, or 125 grams a day. Naturally, the figures are approximate and do not take into account, for example, how much meat hunters in New Guinea have harvested and whether Uncle Givy from Kutaisi stabbed his steer or left it for next year. But the order of numbers is roughly clear. There are 46 countries that produce over 1 million tons of meat annually. That's a very large number. Let's say the aforementioned Georgia is considered a very meat-centered country, at least if you judge by their cuisine. However, meat production in Georgia is at the level of only 73,000 tons per year. This is 19 kilograms for each Georgian. Half the world average. Kyrgyz are another nation whose menu, in my opinion, consists almost entirely of meat. However, Kyrgyzstan produces 240,000 tons of meat, 34 kilograms per inhabitant. It is also very far away from 1 million tons. Production of 440,000 tons. But the population is only 3.5 million. That's 125 kilograms of meat for each Mongolian, which is 3 times the global average. The first country on the list, producing over 1 million tons, is Sudan, a state in Africa. To make it easier to visualize such a number, we can take railroad cars. Conventionally, let's calculate that one wagon takes 100 tons of meat. So 1 million tons is 10,000 cars. Again, roughly speaking, this is a train 150 kilometers long. Quite a few. Here's a train of 10,000 cars. It's from Moscow to Kaluga. And then let's operate with these millions of tons. For example, Belarus produces 1.2 million tons of meat a year, Kazakhstan the same amount, New Zealand 1.5 million tons. And this is a very meat country. Their meat production is one of the pillars of their economy. Country 404 is 2.4 million tons of dietary, easily digestible lard, i.e. meat, per year. At least that was the case in 2021. Egypt, a country of 103 million people in the most fertile Nile Valley, produces 3 million tons of meat. If you think it's already close to Russia, it's not. Egypt is only ranked 23rd in the world. Much better than Egypt is Turkey, with 4.3 million tons, and in meat Australia, with its super climate and endless pastures, production is at 4.5 million tons. That is, not much more than in Turkey. Pakistan is the first country on the list, producing more than 5 million tons. It's no longer a joke. A train with that much meat would stretch 750 kilometers. Canada, a country close to us in terms of territory and climate, although it is actually noticeably warmer, produces 5,400,000 tons. Germany, Spain, and Mexico are about the same, at 7.6 million each. India is a country of almost 1.5 billion inhabitants. The climate is impeccable, the territory is impressive, but meat production is at just under 11 million tons of meat. And yes, it is less than in Russia. Maybe the reason is the large number of vegetarians. I don't know. Russia is in fourth place just above India, which is fifth. The annual meat production in our country is 11,400,000 tons, an insane amount. A train with such a load would stretch for 1,700 kilometers. It's like Moscow to Berlin. For each inhabitant of Russia, 78 kilograms of meat produced per year. This is almost double the global figure. However, please note that we are talking about meat produced, not meat consumed, as some of it goes to imports. Only 3 countries produce more meat than us. This is Brazil, huge territory, stunning climate, population over 190 million. All this allows Brazilians to produce as much as 30 million tons of meat annually. That is 3 times more than Russia has at the moment. I'll be honest, it's going to be a little difficult to get around them, but nothing is impossible in this fast-paced world. As Putin said, since the 90s we have grown 30 times in meat production. Can we not grow 3 times more? Second place is the United States. Likewise, its vast territory, beautiful climate, 330 million population and ability to print dollars make the US one of the world's leading meat producers, with 49 million tons. Just think about this figure, almost 4.5 times more than in Russia. For every American, 150 kilograms of meat produced. They outnumber us by only 2 times, but the figure is mind-boggling nonetheless. Even in Mongolia, a country of nomads and many thousands of Qatars, only 125 kilograms per person is obtained. I think there is meat in McDonald's patties after all. Next comes China. Well, who would doubt it? The population is like India's almost 1.5 billion. Only unlike India, the population consumes a lot of what moves. They even say bats and armadillos. Add to this a large territory, a good climate, and Chinese biotechnology, which is now among the best in the world. Thanks to all this, China produces an insane 90 million tons of meat a year, even almost 91 million to be exact. It is said that 1 in 6 people on the planet live in China. Well, it's even cooler with meat. 1 in 4 kilograms of meat in the world is produced by the Chinese. However, in per capita terms, the figures are not particularly impressive. A total of 65 kilograms per inhabitant per year. This is even less than in Russia. This is probably why a huge amount of Russian meat, pork especially, is shipped to China. They consume more of it than they produce.